Welcome back to the Angel Baby Show. I'm Ava Lynn, and we're here with author Noelle Crooks, who is generating a ton of buzz for her new fiction novel, Under the Influence. It's inspired in part by her own toxic female-led workplace experience, working as the brand director at Rachel Hollis's The Hollis Company. This is a coming-of-age workplace novel that explores the underbelly influencer culture and follows a young woman who takes a job working for an enigmatic influencer and quickly discovers there's an ugly side to being a hashtag girl boss. Publishers Weekly says Crooks' debut with a magnetic story. Readers will gobble up this intelligent update on the Devil Wears Prada for the digital age. Thank you so much, Noelle, for joining us. We would love to hear just some fun little tidbits about your book, anything that you'd like to share about this new Devil Wears Prada.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been really such a wild ride. This is my debut novel. And so this time has just been so exciting. I'm really excited about the book specifically because while writing it, I've come to find it's such a universal message. I've heard from so many early readers that they can relate to the main character, they can relate to this story of toxic workplaces or having a bad boss. And so to me, I feel just so lucky to be in an opportunity where I'm connecting with readers and they're really being able to kind of see themselves in the novel.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you kind of mentioned it already, but what was that driving force just, with writing this story? Because it's kind of a scary story to tell in a little bit.
I feel like for me, I definitely fell victim to hustle culture early on in my 20s. Always say I was sort of the child that my most exciting elementary school days were when I got to be line leader. And that is just the energy. I'm like a forever teacher's pet. And so when I entered the workforce, this ended up being sort of right around like 2014 when the girl boss era really started. And I, at that point, really fell victim to hustle culture and was really prioritizing work over mental health and things like that. And so to me, this book also represents maybe the book that I wish I could have read back when I was just joining the workforce. And my hope is that when readers hear the story and hear Harper's journey, maybe they can reflect and also potentially look out for some red flags in their own workplace as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about the a little bit of your path as a writer because you talked about entering the workforce, but like when you were a kid, did you love to write? Did you always want to be a writer? Or like what kind of got you into now becoming a published author?
That's a great question. So early on in my life, I always loved reading. It's actually in my author bio. My late father and I would always go to the library, and it was so much fun for me. I felt so independent because he would kind of let me do my own thing and I'd get to check out all these books. And I really feel like reading and writing kind of go hand in hand. I also just knew I was really bad at math. So that also kind of just made that decision pretty easy. But I ended up really loving writing. I wrote a lot as a kid. And in my career, I ended up in college majoring in journalism and getting really into writing, and same with my career path. But I think in terms of publishing, I always like to say I feel like my journey with it ended up being the quote that says, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, because, all sorts of authors have different journeys. I've heard of people being in prestigious writing programs or, just finding their agent on Twitter or something like that. And so to me, during COVID is actually when I wrote majority of the book, and everybody back then I feel like was making like sourdough bread, and I just decided to make a book instead. And through that and just really believing in it and staying focused and sort of just connecting with the right people, I ended up being able to bring this story to fruition.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I know we'd love to hear just a little bit about the main character, Harper Cruz, just because, it's fictional, but it's also kind of based off of real experiences. So we'd love to hear about her.
So Harper is someone who is really ambitious, and sort of when we meet her in this story, she's living in New York and definitely down on her luck. She is in her late 20s, which I feel like in that time in particular is when you start to sort of look at the people around you and see, maybe some of your friends are married or some of your friends have kids or some people are really deep into their career. And so for Harper, she had all this pent up energy and all this ambition, and she's ready for that next step, which is why we see she applies for this job working for Charlotte Green just on a whim. And through this story, it really kind of just shares that journey of Harper and learning so much about herself. It is a lot of a coming of age story. So she learns a lot about herself. She learns a lot about standing up for herself and inevitably not just finding her voice, but really owning it at the end.
That's incredible.
I'm so excited to read it. And I think that it just sounds so realistic and so exciting to what happens in real life. And personally, like my favorite stories to read are always ones that are based on true experiences and true things that we've gone through. What were certain things that you felt during your time in the workforce that made you want to write? What were some themes you really wanted to cover that you personally experienced and you wanted to share in your book?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the stories in the book are pulled from all different types of experiences from like friends of friends, coworkers. Even I feel like I don't know anybody who hasn't gone to happy hour and sort of vented about their workplace situation or boss. And so a lot of those stories really manifested on the page. And a lot of what that looked like was remembering, stories from maybe something I read on the internet or something a friend might have told me about a comment someone had said to them. In the book, there is a lot that talks about diversity, and there's a lot of microaggressions and a lot of performative diversity. And I know for me, when I reflect back on some of the workplaces I worked at, those were things that I saw, but was also at an age where I didn't really feel, I guess I would say, strong enough or empowered enough to actually speak up. And to me, a lot of the story is a lot of the characters end up having these feelings where I would maybe call them orange flags, because you know something's wrong, but you don't quite know if it's a red flag, and you're almost like gaslighting yourself in your head about the situation. And so a lot of those stories ended up being things that were just major themes in the book.
That's so interesting. I know. I'd love to hear I read in the description that like there was like group bonding and like this like great workplace environment. I'd love to hear about like kind of where that transition was from like realizing that this like great bonding girl power experience like maybe wasn't all that it was worked up to be.
Yeah, I think in the book, a lot of it sort of shows up with some of these rituals that everybody does. One of my favorite scenes in the book is it's Harper's first day and she gets to the office and they end up doing this dance party as Charlotte's entering, and she's entering and everyone is like dancing, and really Harper's looking around thinking, oh, are people going to be almost embarrassed to do that? But she sees everyone is fully acting like they're at a wedding with like too many cocktails, like getting down at work. And she's taken back and she sort of feels like, okay, I guess I need to start dancing too. And a lot of those are things that end up just being super fun in the book, and they end up being kind of silly. And a lot of the workplace has so much character to it. Like they really have a lot of details in the greenhouse, like this neon sign that says success never sleeps, that sort of looms over them as a reminder of you need to be in hustle culture, you need to be in grinding culture, like it is sprint season, all of those different things. And so when you read the book, I've been told it almost can kind of like play out like a TV show or a movie in your head, because it is detailed and really ends up feeling like a real life workplace.
That's so exciting. Is that something that you see for the future, like it becoming a TV show or a movie? Is that kind of something that you'd
That
be
is,
thinking about?
yeah, that is a huge goal of mine. I would love, love, love to see it, a Hollywood adaptation of it. I have been on a book tour, and that's actually a question I've gotten every single city is, when is this going to be on TV or when is this going to be a movie? Because the characters really do sort of jump out at you, and they are characters that feel so dynamic. You want to see it happen. You want it to be on a screen. So I've told everyone on book tour that we're going to quietly try to manifest it and bring that to fruition.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's definitely kind of needed in Hollywood, that like representation of the influencer, world, because it is a completely different world that we're living in right now. And it's different people, different types of bosses than people are used to. And so I'd be super excited to see that in Hollywood.
And I
I
think
agree.
I've also just never really seen a movie or a TV show really talk about influencers. And I think it's really interesting that you wrote this after after you kind of came to a conclusion about this like hustle culture and that maybe you should rest. You wrote it in quarantine, which was probably one of the most restful times we've had. So you probably got to look back and think, oh, that was crazy, or that was intense. My next question, and this is kind of a side question, is you mentioned how Harper stood out amongst thousands of applicants to get selected as this position. And what would you say, like, what were some qualities Harper had that made her kind of a true standout amongst the others?
Yeah, so Harper has a lot of writing experience, so that was really present in her application, and it's something that Charlotte actually calls out. They have this conversation in the car with another character, Bella, and they end up talking about Harper's prestigious college experience and her writing skills and things like that. And Charlotte really prides herself in picking the best of the best. And so to her, she feels like, I've selected you out of thousands of applicants. And so you are so special. And as you sort of read the book and it progresses, that theme of Charlotte really trying to make you feel special and really giving that sort of gold star system, it starts in the car immediately with this interview where she's trying to make Harper feel really special. She's trying to do a lot of those favoritism and things that we end up sort of seeing later on end up being ways and tricks to manipulate the staff and things like that.
That's so interesting. When Elise and I were reading, like, what this book was about and everything like that, we were so excited to do this interview because, everyone loves a good Devil Wears Prada, but there's also kind of like a scary side to that, that being based off of true, real experiences and people kind of connect the dots. What were your fears kind of like going into that and publishing a book that's based off of true experiences?
I think a fear that I had with publishing was a lot about being a debut author. To me, something I've spoken about before is being a debut author. I did not expect it to be so emotional. There's so much that you're sort of learning along the way. I mean, the day after I got my book deal, I ordered a book quickly called What to Do After You Get a Book Deal. That's actually the title of it. And so to me, a lot of the fears I had around the book were, am I going to do a great job? Is this story going to be impactful? And it was something I so deeply believed in. And it was something that I thought was so great. But of course, when you're writing at 3 a.m. and you're sort of feeling doubtful of yourself, all of those insecurities end up popping up. And even with the book coming out, it was something I was a little anxious about, hoping that people could read it and resonate with it. And I feel so fortunate that I've gotten so many messages from people and so many lovely responses to it that I am now in a place where I feel so confident that this story is something that everybody I feel like should read.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wanted to ask a little bit about just with your writing process, like, do you have any tips for just finishing a story? I feel like there's a lot of writers out there that love to write, but they can't complete a story and get to the finish line. What were some just daily practices you did to complete your story?
Well, I definitely think analysis paralysis is very real. And I think as an author, if you are the mix of author and perfectionist, which I am, it can sometimes be difficult. And like I said before, when I was writing this, I was writing it during COVID for no reason at all. I had no book deal. I had just a bunch of time on my hands and I watched like 700 hours of Netflix at that point. And I feel like with that, I ended up just working harder at it and trying to make sure that I didn't get too much in my head and making sure that my biggest tip is just getting it all down. Like, you don't need to focus on it being perfect. You are going to edit this thing 1,000 times and more. So just get the thoughts out and just get it on paper. You can always go back and edit. And then the second thing I would say to it is have other people read it, have other people read your work, trusted friends, family, people who are really big book readers. I definitely know while I'm writing the book, I think I'm so funny and I think every single joke is so great, but you don't know how it's going to resonate with somebody who's actually reading it. So it's really helpful to get other people's opinions and try to get other input to your work.
That's such a good comment. And I think that's such a problem is people kind of edit as they write and they like reread paragraph by paragraph and go back. And I think even just like with school and college, I'll just word vomit the ugliest essay and then go back and try to make it better because at least it flows better in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I feel like I would struggle with if I were a writer, like putting something out and then getting anything negative back, which I feel like is just because it's your writing and it's your ideas and it's part of your story. How did you, if you got any negative feedback, how did you kind of like overcome?
Definitely. Well, I think probably anybody who's published a book will definitely get feedback that is maybe we change this, maybe we add this. Honestly, to me, I feel so fortunate to have such an incredible team that has done this. And I think for me, I cared so much about this book's success that I was able to sort of zoom out. And if there was something that I felt, oh no, I really like it this way, or I really wanted it this way, I was able to think about the fact that this is my first time doing this, but the team that I'm working with has been doing this for years. They've had so many books under their belt. They have so many New York Times bestselling authors, and they've helped bring those books to a different level. And so to me, I think it's focusing more about the book and sort of letting your ego go to the side, because it is easy to end up thinking, oh, every single edit is so personal. But when you really think about it, you're all playing for the same team. And those edits are by people who have likely been doing this longer than you. So I think trusting in your team and trusting in their vision is one of the biggest pieces that I learned.
For sure. No, having a team that you trust too, like so that you can really accept their opinions. But I know we talked a little bit about like Hollywood and making it into like a film, but are there any other next steps that you see, maybe even smaller steps to kind of get to where you want to be?
Yeah, so first, I have been documenting a lot on my social media about the author process and just showing people this behind the scenes and just really honest and transparent feelings and showing them the things that I feel like a lot of people don't see. So that's one thing that I'm excited to continue doing, is sharing that across my social. And then in addition to that, I love these characters a lot. And when you finish the book, I sort of intentionally leave things where you feel really satisfied, but also you kind of are curious, what happened to this character? What about this? What happens to this company? And so I would love the opportunity to revisit them, and I would love to continue telling some of their journeys.
Oh my gosh, it's exciting.
I think that's so brilliant when an author can like perfectly hint at something for like an upcoming conversation. But my next question is, I don't know, I feel like I've always struggled with this, is because your story is about influencers and social media. Is it hard to, when you're writing about social media, do you feel like for just a wide audience, you need to hyper explain things that are kind of, I feel like social media, when you talk about it, it's kind of its own language, like, oh, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. When you're writing, I don't know if that makes sense, but do you have to kind of like backtrack and explain what everything is, or do you just kind of trust the reader and think they'll know, or just the process of influencing?
I think a little bit of both. I think there's a portion where you really want to make sure you're painting out a scene, or you want to make sure that the reader's understanding, oh, this is something that's on a phone, or this is something that's on a computer, or kind of giving those details just in case. But then obviously there is a level of expectation that the reader sort of knows how someone uses Instagram, or how someone posts a story, or the difference between a story or a post. And nowadays, I mean, 5 billion people use social media, which is another reason why I wanted that to be part of the narrative and such a big theme. So hopefully with 5 billion people using it, there doesn't need to be so much explanation with social media. But yeah, I definitely think it's a balance.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
And then sorry, I'm not cutting you off. I'm also gonna have to like turn my camera off in 2 seconds because I have to charge my laptop, but then I'll be right back. But I just wanted to ask you, for my next question, you said that you grew up, you like to read a lot. What certain books and certain authors kind of influenced your writing style, and how would you describe your writing style as an author?
That's a great question. One of my favorite authors is Dolly Alderton, and she has written such amazing books. She actually just announced a new one, I think a week or so ago. And something I really love about her writing is it's so charming and witty and almost conversational. And I think for me, my book is definitely all of those things. It's an easy quote read when it comes to reading it. I call them potato chip chapters because I personally really love when chapters are short because I love it just feels yummy. You're just going through the book and you're passing through all these chapters. And so to me, I think a lot of my writing style ends up being that sort of fun, conversational, something that you want to just read on the beach or tucking in bed, and something that isn't necessarily a J.R.R. Tolkien sort of novel.
Mhm. I love a short chapter because it makes me as a reader feel super accomplished because I'm like,
Yes,
oh, I'm already on chapter 26, and yeah, so
yes, 100%. I agree.
That's fun. Well, it sounds like it's like perfectly suited for like the type of audience that like wants to read it. I feel like promoting a book nowadays is like so different than what it used to be. Are you like pitching Barnes and Noble, or are you relying more on like TikTok? Like, what is the process to like getting your book out there?
I feel like I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
I feel like I have so many hats on. I'm like a graphic designer, an event planner, a social media manager. I do have a traditional marketing background, so a lot of these things are things that I've sort of leaned on in terms of skill sets I've learned in the past. But when it comes to my book, I've done a lot. I've done events, I've done influencer boxes, I've done collabs with people who have millions of followers on TikTok, and I really like to sort of think outside of the box. And when it comes to this book, I've created fun promo videos and things like that. And so the book is such a fun book. And I think it sort of leans into that when you can market it in a fun, creative way.
Yeah. What's been your favorite,
I
reader
love,
reader author experience?
yeah, I would say first, the book tour has been incredible. Getting to meet readers. I went to Boston for one of them, and that was a city I was a little bit nervous to go to because I didn't really have a footprint there. And going there, people would tell me, oh, I drove hours to come here to see you. And yeah, that is so sweet. And it's something that means so much, especially as a debut author. And so definitely the book tour because I love, love, love connecting with readers. I love getting DMs from readers. That's one of my favorite things. And then aside from that, I would say the influencer boxes. I worked really hard to create them, to make them beautiful. I had fun eye masks and all these other kidney forks and things like that. So it ended up looking so cute, if you ask me. And it was so fun to see everybody posting them and tagging them.
So cute.
I can't imagine like when people come up to you and you create something and your creation has like inspired people or made them feel a certain way or they can relate to it. It's such a cool, I don't know. It's very fascinating how that works. And books really do. Like one of my favorite quotes is like, you can never feel lonely if you have a good book. So I
Yeah,
always think about that. But yeah,
I agree.
I think my next question, just more from like a writer's process, is when you're basing things off things you've heard or people you've experienced, how is the organization process? Like when you're creating characters and you're kind of collecting so many different experiences into like one story and trying to keep it as like simple and easy to approach as you can, like was that overwhelming or did it just kind of come naturally to you?
I think it came naturally. really built out profiles for every single character. So I have every single character. I know what they wear. I know what kind of house they live in. I know if they were to go to Starbucks, what their order would be. Like, I really deeply go into every single character, because when you know them that well and you feel that intimate with them, writing about it makes it much easier, because it's sort of like a friend. Like, oh, I know how that friend would respond to that, or I know how that friend would behave if this situation were to happen. So it's less for me creating them as I go, and more so building out a whole cast of people, deeply, deeply understanding them, and then writing out the story.
That is so I love that. I think that's like almost what actors do when they're taking on a role. They just know every bit and corner about them.
That's
And
such a fun process too. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're creating little avatars and like
Yes.
to
It's like
make
I'm
it.
playing Sims or something, which I used to
Yeah,
love to play the Sims game. Yes, exactly.
me too. That's so funny. Oh my gosh. How
I
fun.
I want to like picture these characters and see photos of them or
Yeah.
drawings.
Well, hopefully
Exactly.
in the Hollywood adaptation, we'll get to see exactly what they look like. If you can't tell, Elise is a writer, and so she, all of her questions I feel like have been really good about like the process of writing, and yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I feel like you have so many, accolades in so many different parts of like business and marketing, and also writing. How has all of that kind of come together to like put you where you are now?
That's a great question. I've had people, leading up to the book launch, you obviously get anxious and you get nervous. And I've had multiple people tell me everything in your life has been leading up to this moment. You are so prepared for all of it. And when I think about my lifespan and the things I've got to work on and things like that, I I definitely end up thinking that it is true that everything that I have done, the marketing, the writing, the sort of betting on myself, even though it felt like a big risk, all of that really did prepare me for this moment. And so I feel fortunate to have had those experiences, because now I feel much more equipped to be in the position I'm in.
That's great. That's such great advice. I know Elise and I are really excited to read this. Thank you so much, Noelle, for joining us today. We would love to hear where to get this book and how to follow along.
So you can get Under the Influence pretty much everywhere you buy books: Barnes and Noble, Target, Amazon, and indie bookstores. And to follow along with me and my journey, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Noelle Crooks, NoelleCrooks.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Angel Baby Show, and listen and watch for more about a giveaway with Noelle Crooks' new book, Under the Influence. Thank you again, Noelle.
Thank you.